The views expressed by the speakers of CamaPlan podcasts are those of the speakers only and may not reflect those of Cama, its members, or employees. Cama does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by these speakers. Professional advisors should be consulted before implementing any options presented. Cama absolutely does not endorse or recommend any individual or organization, including the speakers. Cama, its members, and employees do not accept liability for losses and/or damages arising from errors or omissions within, reliance upon, or any use of the information provided by the speakers. Individuals are strongly encouraged by Cama to conduct their own due diligence before making any investment choices. Cama does not act as, nor offer the services of, an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. If tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other similar expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional should be sought. Hello and welcome back, everyone, to The Road to Financial Freedom, a podcast that allows experts to share their stories and secrets to unlocking their financial independence. This podcast is brought to you by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator in Ambler, Pennsylvania that is focused on educating investors with different ways to grow their retirement savings faster through alternative investments. And of course, we are continuing to record our podcast remotely. I'm Jess Jones, CamaPlan team member and your podcast host. I'm very excited to introduce our guest this week. He is the founder of Zane and Associates, a Philadelphia-based law firm with a focus on simple, effective legal solutions for entrepreneurs in the world of small businesses, startups, and side hustles. As a former managing attorney at Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, he worked extensively with thousands of Philadelphians to not only benefit from his initiatives to escape poverty, but also to break the stigma toward criminals. He is also extremely active in his community, working with a number of nonprofit organizations and partnering with Yeah Philadelphia to found the Empowered Youth Entrepreneur, or I Project, a program for young people to learn the basics of entrepreneurship and earn starting capital for their first business. Not only is he a proponent of educating members of the community to gain clarity and peace of mind about their businesses, but his dedication to his work and his clients has allowed him to help others to take ownership of their financial freedom. So please join me in welcoming Zane Johnson, Esquire, to the podcast. Zane, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Jess. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to get to discuss everything with you. So let's jump right in and start by telling me a bit about your background, where you were born, grew up, went to school, what you studied, etc. All of those great things that kind of made up your early formative years of your career.
Sure. So I was actually, I actually grew up in Ambler. Cool. Nice coincidence. So I grew up in Ambler, went to Wissahickon High School, and then went to Muhlenberg College, where I know you also went, so go Mules.
And funny you went to Wissahickon. I was an Upper Dublin person, so we technically should be rivals.
Yeah.
But no.
It's like, talk about polar opposites there.
Right.
But I won't hold it against you. No, I'm just kidding. So then went to Muhlenberg for undergrad, and then ended up at Temple for law school. And I guess, in terms of my background, I had a really nice upbringing, I think I don't have anything to complain about when it comes to, how I grew up. I was incredibly supported by friends, family, and I feel like that kind of experience, because there were a lot of times, especially as a young man, where I definitely, took myself off the path in terms of being able to, being able to just be a upstanding kind of, someone who's trying to do something productive and has like a focus towards, kind of building something for the future. So, there were plenty of times where I kind of veered off the path, and I had, whether it was family or neighbors or coaches who always kind of helped me keep my head on straight and encouraged me. And so, I think that experience, I try to kind of bring that forward and pay it forward in terms of trying to find ways that I can be that sort of person for other people.
That's awesome. So, I think it's interesting too, the fact that you are so authentic and candid and admitting, there were times where, despite having this incredible support system, there were times where I wasn't as kind to myself as I could have been, or true to myself as I could have been. I'm always interested in how people such as yourself, who are in the position you're in now, have those formative life moments or those aha moments, those epiphanies. So is there any moment that really sticks out to you, or any early lessons from those moments where you kind of had to pick yourself back up, had to rely on that support system, that stick out to you now, and how you've developed your philosophy toward paying it forward to others?
Yeah, there's quite a few, but I guess just a couple that I'll share. So I do remember, in high school, I was definitely a bit of a class clown at times, because it was, I like to laugh, I like to have a good time,
right,
and sometimes it can be at the expense of others. So I had a chemistry teacher in particular in 11th grade who I just really enjoyed getting under his skin. And I think that, it was sort of, I don't know if I would call it a rivalry, or something like that, but it was definitely, me and him bumped heads a lot. And so I would get in a lot of trouble in his class, and, my mom would come up to the school, and we'd have parent teacher meetings and things like that. But it wasn't until my mom actually told my football coach at the time, and was like, he's having trouble in this class. And then my football coach was like, all right, you're going to get this together, or there's going to be kind of some real consequences. And that kind of straightened me out at that time. So it was situations like that. Another situation, I almost failed out of college. So, for me, going to college it felt a little bit like summer camp. You're away from your parents. And, my mom was someone who was always in my ear, always on top of me. So, getting to college and being you mean I only have a couple hours of class every day, and then the rest of the time is whatever I want to do with it. Well, and no one is telling me that I have to go to class. Well,
yeah.
And so I kind of abused that freedom. I came to a situation where, I had just barely kind of passed my first semester, and I was failing every class spring semester. I was on academic probation. I got called into the dean's office to go speak with the dean. And then, at the end of the meeting, she's like, well, I talked to your mom, so your mom is going to call you after you get out of this office. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm about to get chewed out, blah, blah, blah. And my mom called, and she was just very, very calm and didn't sound upset, but she was just very serious. And she was like, you're at school for a reason. And, basically playtime's over, you're spending money. So either, you're going to figure out that this is what you want to do and you want to get serious about it, or, come home and get a job. You don't have to be at school. And, I feel that shift in her tone, to where she had always been really overbearing in terms of you need to do X, Y, and Z. It was almost as if she just really knew that I was, now was the time for me to kind of take the reins on my own life. And so, I feel situations like that, and, like I said, there have been plenty of other situations that I could think of. But those are two kind of really formative kind of experiences that, really kind of helped me get my head on straight in situations where I just was, not focused, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think you're pointing at a really important thing that a lot of folks in this industry, or just industries in general, because I know similarly to you, I had a really difficult time leaving my home life, where I had a mother that was very similar to what yours was it sounds like. And then I got to college, and it was the exact same. I don't know what it is about the water at Muhlenberg, I guess. No, it was a great, it was a great school, but it was very much that summer camp feeling. Like you said, there were a couple hours of classes. I was a theater major, so those hours of classes were roll around on the floor and become one with your body, those sorts of things too. So I was all over the place, and academically I struggled, and it was a similar experience to yours, where it's that self-motivation. Where does that come into play? It's you've had such a great support system your whole life, and then once all of that gets taken away, and it's really just you relying on yourself, where does that where does that connection come in, and where does that self-motivation need to come in? And it sounds like for you, it was that being at a crossroads, and for others, it's kind of just being fed up with a situation. For me, it was, I had been the overachiever in high school my whole life, and then saw in college that my transcript and my GPA were so low that I was like, oh, I need to fix this. I need to do better, and all that sort of stuff. It was more just a perfectionist thing in me, but it kind of like, I think it's different for everyone. So I think you're touching on a really great thing here, where it's, self-motivation comes in different ways, shapes, and forms.
Yeah. And I think that like kind of self-discovery of like becoming self-motivated was very similar to what you kind of described in terms of being an overachiever. Like I didn't have to try in high school. Like it wasn't hard. And so, getting to college and then having all this time and having all this freedom, I kind of just thought I'd coast through again, and had to realize that like that wasn't going to be an option. So I had to decide, are you going to continue to, find success in this path that you're on, or are you going to try to find it in a different way? And I think that, kind of like that confidence of having found success before kind of drove me, and it sounds, kind of similar to what your experience was, kind of drove me to say, well, I'm not going to give up on this path. I'm going to keep moving forward with it and just figure it out. I've dug myself a hole. I'll dig myself out of it, and I'll be okay. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing that so early on too. At what point in your journey, whether it was like during undergrad or before that, were you first interested in becoming involved with law?
Yeah, so my interest in becoming an attorney, I'll say that like it was part based on like a lot of people saying, well, like you like to argue, so you should be a lawyer. And then it was also like I used to really enjoy watching a show called Good Times, which is from the 70s. But one of the characters in it always would talk about like becoming a Supreme Court justice like Thurgood Marshall. And so like that was part of the inspiration as well. And then I also had a high school teacher who taught business law. I took like a business law class, and he was like, you should go to law school. And at the time I'm like, high school like seems like enough. Like, I'm gonna get through college like 4 years, and then you're telling me I should go to like 3 more years of like school. And so just where my mind was at in the time, I was like, I don't think so. So I originally went to undergrad thinking that I wanted to be a teacher. I did so poorly that I thought, well, I'll never get a 3.0 in order to get my teaching certificate. Also thought I was going to major in history, and that just wasn't that interesting. So I was like, let me find something else. And then I took a class in the political science department, and I enjoyed it because it incorporated kind of the storytelling aspect of history that I enjoy, while also bringing in kind of the current events and affairs aspect of it, that comes with being able to debate like policy and what is right, like how do we build systems, how do we how do we create a just society, those sorts of things. And so I always had in the back of my mind that going to law school would be something that I might be interested in. And I had a job in a career services office. And so during my time at the front desk, I would just look through the LSAT book and answer questions, like just kind of thinking, maybe it might happen. And so I took the LSATs. I did pretty well on them. And, when I kind of looked, law school's expensive, obviously. And then, when I applied to a few different schools, but Temple was actually relatively affordable, considering like being able to get some scholarships and then being in state. And so I just jumped at the opportunity to go to law school. I was also at a point where I'm like, what am I going to do with a political science degree, like out of college? Like I think a lot of people kind of struggle with those sorts of questions. Like I had friends who would like study chemistry and were working in like admissions at like different colleges, like doing things that were like completely different from what they had studied. And so that's I kind of jumped in not really knowing necessarily what I was getting into, but I definitely lucked up because, at the end of the day, what I enjoy about practicing law gives me the opportunity to have an impact in the world around me, in a way that I wouldn't otherwise be able to if I hadn't had that type of training.
Yeah, and what a leap of faith it was for you to take, and thank goodness you did, because it sounds, obviously just reading your bio, it sounds like you have been able to do exactly what you set out to do, which is incredible. I think you also touch on one of the great double-edged swords of a liberal arts education is you're able to kind of find all of these different things that you've been interested in, and you take that one class in political science, or for me, I took a class in it was a combination of urban ethnography, new media literacy, wow. and it was one of the coolest things, and I didn't realize that it would really redirect me in a direction to where I ended up now. Mm-hmm. But those classes really get you thinking, oh, well, what are all these new things? I want to do this and that. But then you still come out with that quote unquote, I have the theater degree. Uh-huh. That's what I graduated with. And I was like, well, what do I do with this next? Mm-hmm. So it's definitely, you get exposed to so many different things, but then how do you take that and turn that into something? I think, like you said, kind of just taking that leap of faith and understanding, I have an interest in this and I have a goal here and mm-hmm. this is how I'm going to execute it is such a powerful thing, I think, for a lot of people, especially, if they're just coming right out of college, to be able to know, hey, this is something I can do and I won't fall flat on my face. So yeah. I think it's great. So then for you, when you first you get your law degree, you graduate from Temple, then what inspired you to take that legal focus and really hone it in on solutions for small businesses and startups and entrepreneurs on a smaller scale like that in the small business world?
Yeah. I'll say, like I said, I went to law school, kind of knowing that I wanted to help people, but not right. knowing what that looked like. I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I talked to maybe a couple lawyers who I got connected to through, different connections. And so I really didn't have an idea about what lawyers actually do right. and what the possibilities were for my career as an attorney. I just knew I wanted to help people. And so I got to law school and kind of saw that a lot of the paths that you're kind of funneled towards are if you want to be someone who has the prestige and makes the money, you go to big law and mm-hmm. you spend 70, 80 hours a week working. And I was just that's not the type of life that I want to live. If I'm working right. those sorts of hours, I want to be really focused on, I want to be the one who's kind of driving what I'm doing, and I want to be passionate about what I'm doing. And so I knew that wasn't going to be kind of the right path for me. I explored a little bit more and ultimately kind of decided to go down the path of working in public interest, mm-hmm. specifically with nonprofits and working with people who can't afford attorneys. But I also took a class, it was a poverty law class, and I came across the idea of unbundled legal services, which is basically taking the traditional attorney-client relationship where a client has an issue, the attorney has the knowledge, and the client basically turns everything over to the attorney, and the attorney says, I'm gonna handle this for you, start to finish, and it basically kind of breaks apart that relationship and says, in order to make this something that's more affordable or more accessible to someone, what things can the attorney do and what things can the client do, and where they're kind of working in more of a collaborative way on trying to find a solution. And that really interested me because, again, I wanted to, for me, the overall thing is I wanted to help people. And my reference point for that was everyday working class people, you know what I mean? Ambler is a working class town, you know what I mean? And so, mm-hmm. But, it's not that it's those people who kind of fall in between, I can afford to have an attorney on retainer and, I have to go to the free legal service clinic because I can barely afford to feed my family. And so, just those working class people in between who, what I really realized is that there aren't a lot of legal solutions or services that cater to those folks. There's just not a lot out there, not a lot of options. And so I wanted to, when I went out and created my firm, I wanted to focus on finding ways to empower, everyday people and connect them with legal solutions and services that were affordable, but also quality. And I definitely bit off a little more than I could chew initially because I'm thinking, well, for anyone who doesn't, know a lawyer or, doesn't think that they can afford to work with a lawyer, I'll be the person they go to for anything and everything. And then as I kind of, took a little bit of time, it took me about 6 months to figure out, well, I don't want to do anything and everything.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
There are some things that I want to stay away from because I'm also the type of person where like I take everything that I'm involved in very kind of personally, and I kind of wear it. And so doing things like family law, doing things like commercial litigation where it's like very contentious just weren't good for my like mental well-being and health.
Right.
So, I really ended up, kind of just finding out that I just really enjoyed working with entrepreneurs and people who were starting up small businesses, and I also found that I could relate to what they were going through because I had just recently started a small business myself, and even being an attorney, I got to see how like tedious and kind of difficult that process can be when you're starting a business from scratch. You're the only person in the business and you don't have like a deep pockets to be able to go out and pay a bunch of people to do a lot of different things. So when you're really just kind of building it up from the muscle, as I would say, I got to understand kind of that struggle. And so that's what inspired me to want to work with startups, side hustlers, and help them really set a foundation for their business that would that helps them succeed and grow.
That's incredible, and I think that sounds like that's a huge takeaway that you were able to come away with in the process of starting your business. What was the decision then that kind of, and I think you've touched on a lot of this just based on, what your goal always has been, what's driven you from point A to point Z at this point. But when you were experiencing all these new experiences as a managing attorney with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, was that all in the nonprofit sector there, or what were some of the major takeaways for you that contributed at that point in your life to say, okay, well, this is a decision I want to make, and now I want to start to turn this into my own business? That basically that decision of one of the things that a lot of our guests talk about is that decision to leave working for someone to being the boss, working for yourself, dictating those hours, those sorts of things too. And we've yet to hear it from a legal perspective. So I'm interested in kind of what your journey was.
So I went from law school, so at the end of law school, I was still kind of at this crossroads that I thought that coming to law school would help me avoid, where I was like, okay, so what do I do now? Where do I take my career in terms of a jumping off point? And I had done some work with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity while I was in law school, and I approached the founder and the basically the head of the organization and was like, hey, I'm looking for positions. Do you guys have anything? And he was like, well, our fellow is going to be leaving, but we're not sure if we're going to get the fellowship renewed. So, we'll let you know. But I wasn't really too hopeful about it. So I was, applying to a bunch of different places. And then I got the call about a month before taking the bar exam, from the head of the organization saying, we're going to get the funding back. We'd love to interview you, blah, blah, blah. And so it was like the perfect situation for me too, because I didn't know that eventually I would want to start my own firm, because I had like this entrepreneurial spirit, and I also knew that I wanted to be in control of my own, vision, and basically, I wanted to be my own boss for the most part. And so Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, at the time, it's a really small organization. It's 2 attorneys, and basically was built by the founder. His name is Mike Lee, and in conjunction with a couple of other attorneys like Ryan Hancock and a couple other attorneys. They Mike found that there was this issue basically where people were, having criminal records and didn't have a route to be able to get around that stigma and continue their lives, which became a much more prevalent problem, in the early 2010s and the early 2000s when before a criminal record is just something that sits at a courthouse, but now it's all over the internet, right? Anybody can access that. It can end up on social media, etc. And so it really became an issue that was holding people back, and he recognized that. And so that sort of social entrepreneurial spirit, to kind of develop something to help solve a problem for people whose problem was really just being ignored, and turn that into an organization that now has I think they probably have 7 or 8 different people. They have a few lawyers, they have administrative staff, they have, directors of different initiatives, you know what I mean? And so, it was the perfect opportunity in terms of, the previous fellow was leaving, so it was just me and Mike, and I had the opportunity to kind of be in a position where I was going to take on a lot of responsibility within the organization and get to see a lot about how it was run and understand a lot about how they built the systems and processes that allowed it to have success. And so when Mike left in, I think it was the end of 2017, to go work in Larry Krasner's district attorney's office. He left with, giving me, giving his blessing for me to be the next person who led the organization, which was kind of crazy. I'm a year and a half out of law school. But he had that faith in me. And I think that getting to the actual question, the biggest takeaway for me from my experience at Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity was being able to have the confidence to go out on my own and start something like that, because someone who had done it already placed their confidence in me. And I think sometimes it's so important to have someone who gives you that external kind of I believe in you.
Yeah, definitely.
And when it's someone who you respect, very much, it gives you that, it helps give you that internal confidence on your own. I had a similar experience where in law school, I took a class called Transitional Justice, and I remember seeing the class when we were selecting classes in that process, and thinking automatically thinking oh, I want to take this class and here's the paper I want to write. And so to go from a year later, I wrote the paper, and then the professor was this paper is excellent, it's awesome, I would give it an A+, but you handed it in late, but it was, but she, she loved the paper so much, and she was I want you to, work with me as a, kind of a research assistant, and so it's situations like that, that gave me the belief in myself that okay, I can actually excel in this space, because kind of up to that point, law school is difficult because you don't have tests, throughout the semester or anything like that. So there's no way to really tell where you're at. And you kind of just take your exam at the end of the semester and you get what you get. And it's so, to have that sort of external validation from someone I respected, it gave me the confidence, in the situation of Pulse to be able to say, after leading the organization for about a year and a half, okay, I might not know everything that I need to know, but I had the opportunity here to step out on my own and start my own thing. So I'm just going to take it.
Absolutely. I think it's, you're touching on a really important, I think, experience that a lot of people either get stuck in or take for granted, this and that. It's that you can learn so much from those first few years, either out of school or even in school, just from that thing of that you put so much work into something, and to be able to have that work validated by someone on the other side of it, I think is so crucial. But also the fact that you were able to work under someone so closely who could become sort of like a mentor for you. You could see, this this is how Mike led the organization, and these were the core values that drove him, and what are the core values that would drive me at Zane and Associates, like that sort of thing. I think you can learn so much. Everything's a learning experience is one of my big things that I am, trying to remind myself in different phases of my life. But also, we've heard so much from a lot of different guests, and I think it's what you're touching on here is really exactly that. There's so much to be learned from that first job out of college or this and that. But that's not something that, yes, the circumstances were great, and that the fellow was leaving, they were funding that fellowship again, but that a lot of that work came from you, that self-motivation to pursue the company and pursue Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, and then put in that work for the paper, this and that. So a lot of it, is also, you're just as much part of the equation as luck is in a lot of these situations, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you create your own luck at the end of the day. Like you kind of prepare yourself so that like when the opportunity like arises, like it seems like you're lucky, but the fact is you did the work, or you put yourself in a position to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. Yeah.
I always think of like people who say that winning an award or an Oscar or this and that, like, oh, what, like, I'm so lucky, this and that. They could turn around and see just how much work they've actually done to get there, in terms of, just acting. So I can imagine law, business, finance, anything like that. There's a clear, not necessarily paper trail, but a personal trail of just about everything you've done to get to that point. And yet, like you said, you really do make your own luck. So for you then, taking all of the experiences you had with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity and all the experiences you had from undergrad, graduate school, law school, what does Zane and Associates then do? What are your core goals as a company, and what kinds of legal solutions does your firm provide? I know you've talked about them already, but in terms of, what your goals are and who a typical client of your company would be, what's the goal and who's a typical client is basically the long-winded version of the question. If I could shorten it, that's what it is. But how did you then form your goals, and who are the people that you seek to really bring in? And I know you've mentioned a lot of this stuff, but if you could. No,
I mean, it's definitely, it's helpful to kind of summarize those sorts of things and kind of make them plain. And, I guess I'll start by saying that, to me, aspiring entrepreneurs are really special people. And like, we all have ideas every day. Like, if I could fill like 10 volumes of books with all the ideas that I have, like over the course of a year. But like, to have an idea and then step out on your own with like no guarantee of success, and with probably more than a few people telling you you're crazy, and start a business around one of those ideas, that takes a ton of courage. And I think that for many of us who take that leap, we take it mostly on faith, because especially if you haven't built a business before, you have no idea what you're getting into. And like, as I mentioned before, we started recording, I'm a new parent, and I've always wanted to be a father. And I always thought like, I want to have, like, I would joke around and say like, I want to have a basketball team, I want to have a bunch of kids. And then like, my wife and I had our son, and probably like a couple months later, she's like, oh, let's have another one. And I was like, let's think about this for a second, because it's like, you really don't know, what you're getting into until you're in it. And so, to get back to your question, it's a scary thing to take that leap. And really what I see myself doing is I help new entrepreneurs bridge the gap from a good idea to a successful small business or side hustle, by helping them set a solid foundation for the future growth of their business. And so really what that looks like is I love to sit down with aspiring entrepreneurs pre-launch, learn about their vision, give them some clarity on how they can manifest that vision, and then offer solutions that set a solid foundation for that vision, and it really help free up their time so that they can focus on the things that they wanted to do when they decided to take that leap, right? And so, I'm doing things like, helping people to understand what's the right structure for my business. What type of things do I need to do or think about or consider when it comes to protecting myself, my personal assets, my business's assets, and thinking through all those sorts of things, really just helping to spotlight and highlight those issues and provide some clarity to those things. And so, a lot of the things that I'm doing is helping people to, like I said, start businesses, helping them to create those formational documents for those businesses, helping them to draft contracts that they can use as templates, whether it be with their customers or on their website, or if they're hiring an independent contractor, something that they can have put together once and use in multiple different situations, helping people to protect their brand through trademarks. But even if there's something that I don't do, another lesson that I took away from working in a place like Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity is that you have a lot of, you have more power than you know in terms of being able to empower somebody else to find the solutions on their own. And so I'm really big on if I don't have the answer for it, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to try to pass you along to the person who has it, or try to pass you along to a resource where you can find that answer. And, one of the questions that I feel like a lot of new entrepreneurs have is like, can I start a business without, working with an attorney? And I like to kind of flip that question or change it up a little bit and really just say, can you afford to start your business without working with an attorney? Because, and it's something like I've experienced it personally. Like when I went and started my business, even though I am an attorney, I didn't, I hadn't really worked, as a business lawyer or anything like that. I had, done a few things in terms of working with Pulse. So, I had like that basic background knowledge, but I had to spend a lot of time figuring out, what is the process of starting my business properly? What are the things that I need to be considering? And even, going through and taking all of that time, there were things that I missed. And there were things that because I'm such a do-it-yourself type person, and I was like, I'm starting this out from the muscle. I don't have, a lot of a big budget, I'm gonna just figure it out on myself. And now I'm going back and, trying to, kind of clean up some of the things that I overlooked before, particular in the area when it comes to like accounting and finances, and just, being able to track those numbers in a way that allows you to use them for your business moving forward. And so, it's, like I said, the question isn't, should I have a lawyer? It's like, can you afford to not have one, or really any other professional if it's an accountant? Because at the end of the day, it may feel like it's convenient to skip on that expense at the outset, but you're probably going to end up paying more for it in time, money, and energy down the line, trying to figure out, all right, what did I do wrong, and why is it kind of crumbling before my eyes? Because, I didn't take this to a professional to kind of set it up the right way. And so that's really what I do. And again, it's, it's focusing on working with those new and aspiring entrepreneurs, to help them, like I said, set the foundation that's going to allow them to grow their business and focus on the things that they enjoy about being an entrepreneur, rather than having to try to be, the business owner and the lawyer and the salesperson and the accountant. You can't do everything for your business and expect to have success. So,
yeah, I think that's a great point. There are a lot of things that I feel like I'm same as you. I have so many ideas, but then I always get tripped up on, well, how do those ideas get executed? How do I do this without running into this legality that I don't understand, or this thing that I just don't know? And I know that I have the capability to go and learn more, but I really am learning as I go on too. It's like, well, I need to start to rely on the people that I know so much about X or Y or Z, and then I can make my idea a little bit more of a reality. So I think that what your company does, what your firm does, is really incredible. You're providing people not only with these tools, but with the education they need to be able to contextualize and understand, okay, well, this is the how I do what I want to do. And I think that that's really incredible. I mean, I'm curious too, you know, you probably meet with a lot of different people who have different levels of expertise or background in this field, or some people who just really understand the finance stuff but are terrible salespeople, like that sort of thing. So for you, what are some of the common characteristics or things that you've noticed in small business owners or future entrepreneurs, things like that, that you think make people successful? Whether it's, you know, I understand that everyone's different, but what are some of the things that you've seen over the course of your time helping folks like this that really set the ones that are going to be successful up from the ones who have some more work to do, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, you know, I think it's so true that like people come to you or come to me from all over the spectrum in terms of, you know, their knowledge of different aspects. And like one of the things that, you know, I've kind of learned over this process of building my business is that really, you know, small business is like this like conglomerate of like all of these different skills and knowledge bases. And like there is so much that goes into understanding how to build and grow and run a successful business, and nobody is going to be an expert at all of those things. And so, you know, but I think that I think that when it comes to the traits that make a successful business person, most of those really just come from like the traits that make someone almost successful in kind of any sort of endeavor. And it doesn't necessarily have to be small business. So like the things that I think about, number one to me is patience. And, you know, I think you have to understand that as a new entrepreneur, like your vision is not going to just manifest overnight. You know what I mean? Like it's a great idea, but you have to really sell it to people, and you have to really get them, you know, work to get their attention. And there are a lot of things that go into making sure that, you know, when you get their attention, you're set up in a right way to deliver experiences that people really enjoy and that they want to talk about and they want to come back for again and again. And so you have to have that patience to kind of understand that, like, all right, I've got a great idea, but it's going to take some time to be able to, you know, bring that forward. When I first started my firm, you know, I was like I said, I was like, I'm going to solve everybody's problem in every area of the law. Yeah. And I honestly thought, because at the time, you know, my wife is in the Army and she's a doctor. She had just graduated from medical school and was going to be, you know, coming down to Maryland to Walter Reed to do a residency. And I was like, you know, I will build this firm in a year, maybe 2 years, and then sell it. And you know, I found out really quickly, like, that's not how this is going to work. You know, like,
right. Yeah. It's like you said with your son. It's like you have to have some level of being in it experience, getting your hands dirty to actually know what it entails. It's one thing to have a dream. It's another to make that dream come true. It's another thing to understand my dreams come true, but I don't like this part of it. So how do I fix this? Yeah. It's a learning curve. It's always a learning curve. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, you know, so patience is huge. I think the other thing is passion. I think that in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to be purpose driven. You can't be driven by the idea that, like, I'm going to make $1 million. I mean, that's something to drive you, but like, what do you want to do with that $1 million? You know what I mean? Like because there are going to be some days where you're just like, why am I doing this right now? You know, like, why am I putting myself through this? And it's that overarching purpose that, you know, continues to drive you forward. And then I think that the third thing that comes to mind is confidence. You know, I think that being I think being a successful entrepreneur is like those characteristics are similar to being successful in any field or any endeavor. And confidence is one of those things that you have to have in some way, shape, or form. You have to have this belief in yourself that, I'm going to come into the hard times, but I'm going to get over that hurdle because, they're going to be there. Like those walls, those barriers, you're going to hit them. And unless you have that belief in yourself that you're able to navigate those situations, you're not going to be able to.
Yeah, I think all of those traits are especially incredible because not only do they point out, okay, well, these are some things I've run into with successful people, but these are all things that I think people can either improve upon or learn for themselves or better themselves by doing more of. Like, people can become more, it's difficult, people can become more patient, people can ask the right questions to become more passionate, and confidence is an ever-evolving journey. I think so many people go through, but confidence is something that I think if someone's coming to you, they do have, like you said, that confidence in some way, shape, or form. It's just a matter of how do I build that up. So I think those traits are wonderful that you lay them out that way, especially because they are things that people who may not feel like they're at that end of the spectrum right now can get to someday. So I think that's great. Is there anything you've learned from your clients that's surprised you about yourself, or anything new you've learned about yourself throughout your time as being manager of this firm or like starting your own business, some new discoveries that you've been able to uncover about yourself? It's
been really interesting. Well, so I guess I'll start with talking about some of the things that I've kind of discovered about myself. One of those things is as I mentioned, that I tend to wear like the situations that I'm in, and I'm very, I get very connected to the situations, and I take things personally. You know what I'm saying? Like if I'm
you're not alone.
Yeah,
same.
It's like if I'm not able to solve a problem, or if I'm trying something and it's not working, I tend to take that as a personal affront to my skill or my ability to do something. And I've had to take a step back from that to realize that, like, number one, that's my ego that is stepping into the middle of things and saying, hold up, this is about me, when really it's not about me at all. Like, I'm being asked to come in and help in a situation, but the decisions that people are making, the things that people are doing, is based on their own perspective, their own experiences, and coming from a place that I won't ever have the time or energy to try to understand completely. And so I have to realize that, like, those things are happening externally aren't a reflection on who I am and what I bring to the table, or what value I have, or what value I add. And so that's actually been something really nice to kind of discover about myself, because I can take that from, that working with my clients and the situations that I encounter, as an attorney, and apply them to every relationship that I have. And so that's, it's been a way for me to kind of be more at peace with just kind of the way things go, and recognize I have control over some things, but I don't have control over everything. So the things that I don't have control over, just let it be and move on. And then I think the other things that I've learned kind of outside of myself, one of the things that I've been able to see is just how fragile new business, how fragile and how vulnerable of a situation and position people are in when they start a new business. It's tough, right? It's like, sometimes it feels like there are so many different things that are like working to collaborate to try to stop you from recognizing like that small business dream. And like, it's tax season, right? And so this was the first year where, I decided that I'm going to work with an accountant. Like, I always did my taxes in the past because I know how to do taxes. Like, but I was like, I'm going to work with an accountant because I need to save that time. And talking to my accountant, and then like realizing, and last year was also like the first year that I actually kind of did really well with my business. And so like talking with my accountant and then realizing like how much I have to pay in taxes was like just mind blowing. I was like, oh my gosh, like really? Like I have to, and I'm talking about like how much do I how much do I pay up front, for like expected taxes for like self-employment tax? And he's like, oh, we'll put you at like 40%. And I'm like, what? I thought that only like millionaires had to pay that much in taxes. And so it's to see how fragile that is, has been even more motivation for me to kind of step up my game to figure out how can I continue to bring value to the people that I'm working with. And then I also think, one of the other things that I'm finding interesting is as our economy kind of seems to move closer towards encouraging people to work as sort of independent contractors. And especially like because I think that, I was talking to someone else who's way more experienced in business than I am, and getting their opinion and hearing them say that they think that there are a lot of companies that are actually going to want to shift a lot of their employees from working as employees to working as independent contractors, and that likewise are going to be employees who are going to want that flexibility and want to be able to kind of ply their trade in that way. Is going to be really interesting to kind of see if government policies and laws around how people work as independent contractors and attitudes towards that, how they kind of shift. Because I definitely think that right now, that from my personal experience, the ability to kind of work in that way, it's difficult. There's a lot of things that you have to try to figure out, and a lot of things that kind of pop up on you. And so things have to kind of be just right in order for you to kind of find success at times. It'll be interesting to see that, like, with companies, kind of probably wanting to move in that direction, and people kind of also wanting that option, whether or not federal, state, and local policies kind of shift to kind of simplify people's ability to kind of work in that way. And the benefits and drawbacks that kind of come with that.
Yeah, so I can imagine for you then, other than obviously living through those experiences yourself with owning a small business that is growing and successful, like you're saying, and it's getting bigger through that success. For you then, how do you take those moments of, okay, well, I can see the market starting to change. I can see that policies may start to change. What's something that you use, really, a tool, resource, anything like that helps you keep up with your knowledge of small businesses, policies, this and that? I can imagine just being a lawyer in this field in general, you probably have to do a lot of that work. But for you, what's something that you find to be extremely reliable when it comes to, you can sense things are changing and that you need to further your own education so that you can help educate your clients?
I think number one, and I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but like relationships, like I think relationships are so big in business. That's been one of the lessons that I learned pretty early on, thankfully, in terms of starting my business, is that, like, having relationships with people who know things, you kind of learn a lot of those things that they already know, like just in conversation, you know what I mean? And in discussion, you kind of figure out, what sort of things are going on. And so building those relationships with, people who know the things that you want to know, people who are connected to the folks that you want to be connected to, that's a great way to kind of figure out what's going on. I make ample use of Google, as I think we all do.
Yeah, it's there for a good reason.
Exactly. So, there's a lot of information out there. Of course, you have to sift through it and kind of take your time to figure out what's going to be reliable and what's not, and, check more than a few sources just to make sure that the information you're getting is correct. But, I do make ample use of Google. I also I've been working with SCORE, SCORE's Philadelphia chapter. So SCORE is an organization through the Small Business Association that provides a ton of different resources for small business owners, entrepreneurs, whether it's mentorship. I run workshops on legal, starting a business and keeping your business legal question and answers. But they have so many different workshops. They have blogs. And so there's a lot of information there. It's like one of those places where there's a lot there that you can kind of figure out if you're an entrepreneur, small business owner. And then in Philadelphia specifically, there are a number of different incubator programs. So there's LA21, the Community College of Philadelphia has its own incubator program. There are a couple different other ones that escape me right now, but there are a number of different incubator programs where that are available. I know like some of these like larger kind of nationwide incubator programs can be like tough to get into, but the ones in Philadelphia, like they run pretty frequently and there are a ton of resources there. And I'm interested in like one of my current interests is like learning about buying businesses and figuring out more of kind of how that works. And so I've subscribed to a newsletter called The Business Insider that I find helpful, but there are tons of other, I feel like, newsletters out there, and so there's a ton of information that's out there, and I think it's really kind of just finding the sources of information that kind of align with what your interests are, and really at this point it's about filtering information more than anything else. Like I feel like you can open your email and the problem isn't not having information, it's like having too much and having an overload.
You Google search it once, it's going to come up in so many different ways in your Facebook ads and all that stuff.
It's like, okay, I just needed that one time.
I know. You look up one YouTube video of someone on The Voice, and then all of a sudden you're like subscribed to the whole Voice channel. Forget about it. But I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that's a great point. The idea of there's a lot of information out there, but it's the information that is reliable, and you have to do the work to figure out what is reliable. But it's the information that works best for your way of thinking, your way of working, that sort of thing as well. I'm also interested for you, you've been so involved in the community and you've been an active member, you're still teaching these workshops and things like that. What are, and one of the most major contributions is partnering with the Philadelphia to create Empowered Youth Entrepreneur Project, which I really wanted to get to talk to you about. So what is this project and how has it allowed you to give back to your investment community and the larger community as a whole? Because, this is obviously working with young entrepreneurs, not just entrepreneurs or people who have been in business, people who want to move from working in a job for X amount of years. These are people who are thinking in a completely different way. So what's that experience been like for you?
It's been it's an awesome experience. I definitely want to shout out Philly, because they do so much for the communities that they do work in. It's not just entrepreneurship programs, it's food giveaways, it's providing like just a safe space for young kids to hang out and be themselves, especially with a lot of the craziness that's going on in the city right now. It's video game tournaments, it's basketball tournaments, they do so many different things. So definitely big shout out to them. But partnering with them has been awesome, especially from the perspective of being able to explore the possibilities. They're all about new ideas and how can we engage with young people in a way that's going to enrich their lives and empower them to, expand their horizons and have different perspectives. So, when I came to James and Kendra, who founded the organization and said, here's what I want to do, they were like, and I was like, what do you guys think? I'm not sure. You guys are busy, I know. But they were like, no, this is awesome. This is something that we've, wanted to do something along these lines, and we'll give you the reins and let you kind of run with it. So it was a great experience. The first kind of cohort was really a pilot to kind of figure out, what works, what doesn't work. How do we, kind of really build a program from this that is going to empower young people, teens, young adults, to bring their vision forward and have an opportunity. And for me, it's as I mentioned before, it's bringing that full circle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I had people who supported me, who believed in me, and showed me that they believed in me through their actions by investing time in me, by investing money in me, by just investing their energy and their concern in my well-being. And so it's an opportunity for me to be able to pay that forward and to say to young people who might not have these opportunities otherwise, there are people who likewise believe in you and believe in your vision and want to see you bring that forward because we understand that you are the future. And so it was a great experience. I'm looking forward to working on it and building with it more and just seeing where it goes. So
yeah, I think that it's an incredible project and I commend you for it. I think so many people, and I'm lucky that I haven't spoken to anybody on this podcast who's talked to me in that way, but young people have ideas too. And I think the idea of, they understand that Facebook algorithm that's giving you the targeted ad. That sort of like they think differently because the world is a bit different and they are the future of our world. So to be able to tap into that and say, yeah, your vision does matter. I'm investing my time in you, and to be able to provide people with that position that you felt has contributed so much to your success is, I think, just, I'm not even like BSing you. I have goosebumps talking about it too. So I think that it's incredible. And I can't wait to see where it goes and what the people who are in this program are able to come up with and what they're able to provide for not only the Philadelphia community, but the world as a whole.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are winding down on time, but one question I do want to ask you, and I'm very interested to hear your personal perspective on this, is we ask all of our guests who are from a bunch of different backgrounds, who work in different areas of finance and this and that, what would you say are your keys to building wealth and unlocking your financial freedom? So for you, what would that be? And these don't have to be financial, obviously, but for you, and we talked about this in so many different ways and so many different forms of the question, but what's something or some things that have helped inform the way that you look at success?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. In terms of the keys to building wealth, I three things come to mind immediately. The first is time, and understanding no matter what that investment is, it will take some time to grow, for the most part. And that, like I mentioned before, you have to be patient, but also understanding that like our time is limited. And so, you never know when it's going to run out. And so you want to be able to manage that time well and prioritize it. And so time is one key. I think the other, as I mentioned before, I talked about relationships, and I think relationships are so key. Understanding like whether you're talking about financial wealth or you're talking about, a wealth of just whatever, wealth in any sort of context. None of the things that we do as human beings come independent of like the world around us. You know what I mean? And so in terms of building wealth, it requires having those relationships with people, whether it's business partners or mentors or coaches or family. For me, like the truth is, I'd still be working for a paycheck if it wasn't for the support of my wife saying, I know that this is something that would make you happy, and I know that this is something that you want to pursue. So even though we're going to have to tighten the belt a little bit on our budget because you might not be making much money for a while, I want you to be able to pursue that. And so relationships, I think, are key also. And then I think, the third thing that comes to mind is information. We talked about how much information is available nowadays. There's a ton of information out there, and you kind of got to sift through it. But taking the initiative to, keep yourself educated, keep yourself up to date, because the other thing is like things are changing so rapidly in the world that we live in today. It's mind-boggling. And so you have to take the initiative to continue to want to learn, have the attitude that I still have things to learn. And one of the things that you mentioned too is like being able to understand that you learn things from having interactions with everybody that you come into contact with, every experience that you have. There's a lesson to be learned in that, which, so you mentioned that earlier, and I think that that's an awesome point. And then, I think that to the second kind of aspect of your question, when it comes to how I define success, I kind of look at it as, success to me is being able to take a deep breath and just feel grateful for the things that I've had, and where I'm at. And, I think I try to look at success in a way that isn't dependent on other people or what they think of me, which I think is like so difficult in the day and age that we live in. And, and I think too, for our generation in particular, like we're used to having social media. And you think about it, like we all have personal brands at this point.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, I think it's tough. And like to some degree, especially as a business owner, like you have to have a personal brand, but you also have to realize you have to divorce your view of yourself from your personal brand and understand that like when, something happens that might be embarrassing to me, that doesn't have to be a knock on who I think I am as a person or what my value is or what I bring to the table, because otherwise you're constantly trying to chase this approval, which is very, very, very fleeting. And so, like I said, I try to define success as something that no one else can take away or give to me. It's something that comes from inside to be able to say, I'm grateful for where I am and I'm in control of where I go next. And that's kind of how I try to look at it.
Yeah, I love that response. And thank you for this entire conversation, Zane. I'm rethinking a lot of things for myself and how I can start to believe in my own ideas a little bit more. And I really hope our listeners who listen to this episode can feel the same way, because I think that this is a really powerful conversation for that. And it's weird because I just heard the reflection of, not other people's, the things that other people do, the things that other people say or think, not a reflection of you in terms of my own relationships or life and this, and it's funny to hear that echoed again, in 1 week. So it's a new discovery for me, and I hope that people can hear things like that and the other stuff we talked about and really take away from that, how do I turn that into success for myself? So thank you again.
Thank you. And, I hope that, I definitely just hope that from the conversation that anyone who is listening, will, like, if you're thinking about starting a business, that you start to kind of put those building blocks into place. It might be something that you do gradually over time. For me, I'd been thinking about the firm that I wanted to create for a couple years before I actually got the opportunity to jump out there and do it. And, so if you're not at a point where, you can quit your job, or you're not at a point where you can go pursue it full time, find ways that you can continue to move the ball forward, and that momentum will take you where you want to go eventually. So. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. There's so many sound bites I feel like we could take from this and put up on like a vision board for people who are listening. But thank you. One last question before we sign off is, how can people reach you if they have any additional questions or want to get in touch with you personally? Do you have any websites, social media, anything that listeners can use to get in touch with you, Zane?
Sure. So I'm online. My website is M as in Mary, ZA.legal. That's MZA.legal. So it's short and sweet, pretty easy to remember. And then in terms of being on social media, it's similar. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. And then, those pages are just mza.legal, except for my LinkedIn, which is M. Zane Johnson. And so definitely feel free to reach out, even if it's not like, hey, I need your services, but it's just, I heard something that you said, and I just want to connect on that and build on it because, I love having these sorts of conversations. I find them like so enriching. And as I was saying before, like with working from home and, working virtually and being in quarantine, sometimes it's like you don't have those opportunities to just have those conversations with new people because you're not like meeting anybody outside of the context of like, I need your help. Can you talk with me about my business? And so if anyone is open or wants to have, just like a conversation, just chopping it up a little bit, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you everyone who is listening. Be sure to be on the lookout for more CamaPlan events that feature Zane Johnson. But until then, thank you for joining us again this week on the road to financial freedom. Be sure to tune in again next week to hear more from our experts who have paved their roads to financial freedom, or call CamaPlan today to learn more about how you can start to take control of your future wealth. Thank you again, Zane, and thank you, everyone. Thank you all for tuning into our podcast. We truly hope that you're enjoying your ride along the road to financial freedom so far. If you like what you've heard and learned, or if you want to hear more about certain topics that we may have already covered or have yet to cover, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. We would love to hear any feedback from you so that we may continue to make our podcast the best that it can be for you, our listeners. Thanks again, everyone, and remember, tune in next week to The Road to Financial Freedom.